My son handed me a pen, his wife smiling beside him. "Just sign the papers, Mom," he said, "and then disappear." My name is Dorothy Hayes, and to them I was just a poor widow living a quiet life. What they didn't know was that the poor old woman they were trying to erase was the one secretly funding their entire lavish world, their million-dollar house, their luxury cars, their endless vacations. That pen wasn't for my disappearance. It was the trigger for their ruin. Have you ever sacrificed everything for the people you love, only to be treated like you were worthless? I want to hear your story in the comments below. The air on the 4th of July at our lake house always smelled of memories, cut grass, barbecue smoke, and sunscreen. But this year, for the first time, I caught the scent of greed. It was a faint, metallic odor underneath the familiar festivities, sharp and unwelcome, and it seemed to follow my daughter-in-law, Emma, wherever she went. The party was in full swing, a perfect tableau of American summer. My grandchildren, 8-year-old Olivia and 6-year-old Noah, were chasing fireflies near the water's edge, their shrieks of laughter mixing with the distant boom of fireworks from across the lake. My son, Liam, stood at the grill, the last of the burgers sizzling over the coals. He was laughing at something a neighbor said, but his shoulders were tight, and he hadn't met my eyes for more than a second all afternoon. I excused myself from a conversation with the Hendersons from next door and walked towards the old boathouse, needing a moment of peace. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of cedar and lake water. Hanging from the rafters like a sleeping bird was the kayak Arthur had built with his own 2 hands. I ran my palm along its smooth, weathered side, feeling the familiar contours. I remembered the day he'd finished it, just a few years before he passed. He'd wiped the sawdust from his brow, his face beaming with a quiet pride. "This is our real legacy, Dorothy," he'd whispered, his arms around my waist. "The memories we build here, not the numbers in some bank account." A familiar lump formed in my throat. This place, every splintered board and peeling shutter, was infused with him. "Mom?" Liam's voice startled me. He was standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the setting sun. Emma was beside him, a glass of white wine in her hand, and a smile so bright it felt rehearsed. "Emma and I were hoping to have a quiet word with you. We have something exciting to share." They led me away from the party to the screened-in porch overlooking the darkening water. The sudden quiet felt heavy. Emma launched into a breathless, excited speech, her words a torrent of corporate jargon I barely understood. It was an app, she explained, a wellness and luxury lifestyle platform that would synergize holistic health with premium market branding. Her eyes gleamed with an ambition that felt sharp and cold. "It's a can't-miss opportunity, Mom," Liam chimed in, though his enthusiasm felt hollow. "This is going to secure our future, the kids' future." And then, after painting a picture of a glittering future, Emma got to the real reason for their ambush. "The only thing we're missing, Dorothy, is the initial seed capital," she said, her voice dropping to a confidential, almost syrupy tone. She gestured vaguely toward the lake, the wine in her glass swirling. "We were thinking, this house is a lot for you to manage on your own, all the upkeep, the taxes. We thought, as a way to multiply Dad's legacy, we could sell it." The words hung in the air, sucking all the warmth out of the summer evening. Sell this house. Sell the boathouse, sell the kayak, sell Arthur's legacy for an app. I folded my hands in my lap, keeping my voice even and measured. "This house isn't for sale, Emma. It's a home. It's where your children catch their first fish. It's where their grandfather's memory lives." The mask of sweetness on Emma's face flickered. Just for a second, I saw a flash of raw, ugly frustration before she smoothed it over. "Of course," she said, her voice tight with forced understanding. "It just seems like such a waste to let a huge asset like this sit here for memories." As they turned to walk back to the dying party, I saw Liam discreetly slip a folded sheaf of papers into Emma's expensive handbag. He didn't know that I saw it, and I didn't yet know that it was the beginning of the end for the family I thought I knew. My refusal, it seemed, hadn't extinguished Emma's ambition. It had only driven it underground, into sneakier, darker channels. The weeks following the 4th of July were filled with a profound and unsettling quiet. The usual Sunday calls from Liam became brief, perfunctory check-ins. The stream of texts from Emma, usually filled with photos of the children or links to articles she thought I'd like, ceased entirely. My quiet Connecticut home, which had always been a sanctuary, began to feel like an outpost, a place of exile. I found myself wandering through the rooms, dusting furniture that was already clean, my thoughts replaying that tense conversation on the porch and the image of Liam, my son, discreetly passing that folder to his wife. The first move came on a Tuesday afternoon late in July. The phone rang and it was Emma, her voice a cascade of artificial sweetness that set my teeth on edge. "Dorothy, I was just thinking about you. I feel so terrible we haven't spoken properly since the 4th. I do hope you're not overworking yourself in that big house all alone." We exchanged hollow pleasantries for a few minutes, her questions circling like a vulture before landing on their target. "You know, it's silly, but I was just tidying up our files, and it made me think, just for my own peace of mind, where do you keep your important papers? Like the deeds to the houses? It's just, in case of an emergency, we'd need to know how to help you." A cold knot formed in the pit of my stomach. "They are in a very safe place, dear," I said, my voice dangerously light. "You don't need to worry your head about that." The next day, while checking my email, a new message appeared from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Appointment Confirmation, White Mountain Appraisals." My heart hammered against my ribs as I clicked it open. It was a formal confirmation for an appraisal of the lake house, scheduled for the following Monday morning at 10 a.m., an appointment I had never made. My hands trembled as I dialed the number listed in the email. A cheerful receptionist answered on the second ring. "Oh yes, Mrs. Hayes," she said after I explained my confusion. "We have you down for 10 a.m. on Monday, July the 28th. Your son, Mr. Liam Hayes, set it all up for you last week. He said you were eager to get the valuation." I hung up, the room feeling suddenly frigid. Without hesitating, I called Liam. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice flustered, out of breath. "Mom, hey, what's up? I'm in the middle of something." "I just received an email from an appraisal company, Liam. They say you scheduled an appointment for the lake house." There was a half-second of dead air, a pause filled with the frantic construction of a lie. "Oh, that's just a formality, Mom, for the insurance." "Yeah, the insurance company. They need an updated valuation for the policy to stay current." The excuse was so clumsy, so transparent, it was almost more insulting than the act itself. Insurance companies don't schedule appraisals without notifying the owner directly. He knew that, and he knew that I knew it. The rest of the call was a blur of his mumbled excuses and my monosyllabic replies. He hung up, citing a meeting he had to run to. I stood in my silent kitchen, the receiver cold against my ear, with the certain sickening knowledge that my own son had just lied to my face. That evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of purple and gray, a dark sedan I didn't recognize pulled up across the street. It sat there for 5 minutes, its engine off, a silent, unblinking eye in the dusk. It might have been nothing, a coincidence, but a mother's intuition told me I was being watched. A gut feeling isn't evidence, and I knew I needed something more solid than a clumsy lie and the memory of a strange car in the night to confront a truth my heart refused to believe. For the rest of the week, I tried to busy myself, sorting through boxes of Arthur's old papers in his small study. It was a task I'd put off for years, but now the scent of old paper and ink felt grounding. A connection to a time when my world made sense. Still, my mind kept replaying Liam's nervous voice, the lie about the insurance valuation echoing in the quiet room. On Saturday morning, while sifting through a stack of old tax returns from 2003, I couldn't stand the corrosive uncertainty any longer. My hands felt cold as I looked up the number for Sarah Jenkins, a dear friend who had been the top realtor in the Lake Winnipesaukee area for over 20 years. Arthur and I had bought the lake house through her. I told myself I was just calling to catch up, to ask about the local market out of casual curiosity. "Dorothy, how wonderful to hear from you," she answered, her voice as warm and familiar as a summer afternoon. We chatted for a few minutes about her daughter's college applications and the unusually warm weather. Then I steered the conversation, my voice tight despite my best efforts to sound casual. "So, Sarah, how's the market up there? Still as crazy as ever?" There was a brief, strange pause on the other end of the line, a beat of silence that stretched for an eternity. "Dorothy, I'm surprised you're asking me. I was about to call you to give you an update. The listing went live yesterday, and we've already had 3 serious inquiries." The papers in my lap suddenly felt immensely heavy, each one a lead weight. The listing?" "For your house," Sarah said, a note of clear confusion in her voice now. "When Liam came to my office on Wednesday, he said you wanted to move fast. He seemed so certain of your wishes." The room began to tilt, the edges of my vision blurring. "Liam came to your office?" "Yes. He showed me the power of attorney you'd signed, giving him full authority to handle the sale. He explained you were just too busy with things in Connecticut to be bothered with the details. Honestly, the signature looked so legitimate, Dorothy. I never would have questioned it. I had to grip the solid oak of Arthur's desk to keep myself from falling. Power of attorney, a document I had never seen, let alone signed. The truth hit me with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. Forgery. My own son had forged my name to steal my home. My voice came out as a hoarse, ragged whisper. "Sarah, I need you to do something for me. I need you to email me a copy of that document, right now." The agonizing 2 minutes it took for the email to arrive felt like a lifetime. The soft ping from my computer made me jump as if a gunshot had gone off. I clicked open the PDF attachment, and there it was, my name, signed at the bottom of a legal document in a hand that was a grotesque parody of my own. It was close, but it was dead. It lacked the familiar, confident loop of my D, the upward flourish on my H. It was the signature of a stranger, a thief. A wave of nausea washed over me, and I felt as though someone had just punched me in the stomach. I knew then that I couldn't fight this alone. I walked over to Arthur's bookshelf, my legs unsteady, and pulled out his old, worn leather address book. My fingers, trembling, flipped through the pages of names from a life we'd shared until they stopped on one I had not called in many years. Albright, Arthur's financial advisor, his most trusted confidant. The appointment with Mr. Albright wasn't just a search for advice. It was the opening of a Pandora's box Arthur had left behind. The taxi ride downtown felt like a journey to another world. I, in my simple navy dress, felt out of place as I walked through the cavernous marble lobby of the glass tower, surrounded by men and women in sharp, expensive suits. The elevator ascended to the 40th floor in a swift, silent rush, and when the doors opened, I was met with the hushed, almost reverent atmosphere of a place where fortunes were managed. Mr. Albright's office was just as I remembered from years ago, a vast room walled with dark mahogany bookshelves, the air smelling of old leather and lemon polish. A panoramic window offered a god's-eye view of Manhattan. He greeted me not with pity, but with a grave respect that immediately calmed my trembling hands. He listened without interruption as I recounted the entire story, my voice shaky at first, then gaining strength as the righteous anger took hold. I finished by sliding the printed copy of the forged power of attorney across the vast, gleaming desk. It looked like a child's toy in this cathedral of finance. He studied it, his expression unreadable, then looked at me with a profound, weary sadness. "Mrs. Hayes." "Dorothy," he said, his voice gentle. "I am not surprised. Arthur always foresaw this possibility. He used to say that Liam had a good heart but a weak spine, and he worried that someone ambitious and without scruples could lead him astray. He set up the trust this way as a final failsafe, a way for you to protect the family's legacy from the family if it ever came to that." He stood, walked over to a large, formidable safe built into the wall, and spun the dial with practiced ease. The heavy steel door swung open with a soft hiss. He returned with a thick, heavy portfolio bound in dark green leather, embossed with 4 gold words, "The Hayes Family Trust." He opened it on the desk between us. "He never told you the full extent of it because he wanted you to live a normal life," Mr. Albright explained. "But he made sure you, and only you, held all the power." He turned the book around. He explained that I was the sole trustee, the absolute authority. Liam was merely a beneficiary, entitled only to what I decided to dispense. Then he showed me the statements. My eyes scanned the columns, the numbers blurring through a haze of disbelief. I saw them, line by damning line. Monthly mortgage payment, Greenwich property, $17,500. A home I had never been invited to. Monthly lease payment. Porsche Cayenne Turbo, $2,300. The car Emma had claimed was a company bonus. Greenwich Country Day School, semester tuition, $31,000. For grandchildren who were being taught to see me as a charity case. And then the credit card statements, an endless river of excess. The names blurred past. Cartier, the Four Seasons in Aspen, a boutique in Paris. The totals at the bottom of each page were staggering, more than Arthur and I had lived on in an entire year, spent in a single month. Mr. Albright pointed to a clause in the trust's founding document, highlighted in yellow. He read Arthur's own words aloud, his voice solemn. "Sole and absolute discretion shall be granted to my wife, Dorothy Hayes, to manage, distribute, or suspend all funds as she sees fit." He looked up at me. "The right to freeze this account is entirely yours, Mrs. Hayes." My gaze fell upon the bottom line of the final page, the total current value of the trust. It was a number with more zeros than I had ever allowed myself to imagine. The number wasn't just a figure. It was a shield. It was a sword. It was the power to end this. I wasn't a victim being cornered. I was the one holding all the cards. The hot, messy anger in my heart began to cool, hardening into something else. Something cold, sharp, and focused. Mr. Albright closed the portfolio with a soft, definitive thud. "So, what is our plan, Mrs. Hayes?" I took a slow, deep breath, and a bold, ruthless, and perfect idea began to form in my mind. To set the perfect trap, the prey must believe it is the hunter. I went home from Mr. Albright's office, the heavy leather portfolio of evidence now locked safely in Arthur's desk. The rage and shock had receded, leaving behind a cold, clear purpose. I spent the next day rehearsing my role, practicing the slight tremble in my voice, the weary sigh of a woman defeated. By the time I picked up the phone to call Liam on Tuesday morning, I was ready for my performance. "Liam, honey." "It's Mom," I began, my voice intentionally frail. I've been doing a lot of thinking since everything. I'm just so tired of fighting. Maybe you and Emma are right." I let the silence hang in the air, a carefully placed bait. On the other end, I heard him exhale, a sound of pure relief. "Mom, I'm so glad to hear you say that. We were so worried about you." The lie was effortless for him now. Could we meet for lunch?" I asked, as if I were the one seeking reconciliation. "I just want to talk things over, in person." We met at the Oakwood Diner. a place with worn vinyl booths and the lingering smell of coffee and fried bacon. It was the kind of place Emma despised, which made it the perfect stage for my surrender. I arrived a few minutes early, choosing a booth in the corner and hunching my shoulders slightly, trying to look smaller, more fragile. They arrived together, Liam looking relieved and Emma glowing with a triumphant, poorly concealed glee. She was wearing a new silk blouse that I knew cost at least $400. "Oh, Dorothy, I'm so glad you came to your senses," Emma said, sliding into the booth and placing a hand over mine. Her touch felt like ice. "We just want what's best for you." I offered a weak, watery smile, a masterpiece of maternal defeat. "I know, dear. I'm too old for all this conflict. Family is what's most important. Arthur would have wanted me to help you secure your future." The performance was draining, but seeing the smug satisfaction on their faces was all the motivation I needed. I stirred the ice in my water, letting them think they had won. "So the lake house," Liam began hesitantly. "I'm willing to discuss it," I said, cutting him off gently. "But I can't just sign it away. Your father taught me to be prudent." I paused, letting the hook sink in before I said it. "Arthur always worked with his investment partners on any major decision. I still keep in touch with them. I would like you to present your business plan to them, Emma, formally, in a proper meeting." I watched her face. Her eyes, which had been darting around the cheap diner with disdain, now snapped to focus on me, wide with surprise and then alight with avarice. "If they see your project is as promising as you say," I continued, reeling her in, "then I won't just agree to sell the house. I might even be able to convince them to invest more, a lot more." The bait was taken. Emma's breath hitched, and she couldn't stop the greedy, dazzling smile that spread across her face. "Of course, Dorothy. Absolutely. When can we meet them?" She didn't question who these mysterious partners were or why she'd never heard of them. The prospect of more money had blinded her to everything else. As they left the diner, the victorious smirk on Emma's face was the last thing I saw. She had no idea she had just eagerly set the date for her own day of reckoning. In the weeks that followed, I became a front-row spectator to the theater of my own children's greed. While I moved in the quiet shadows with Mr. Albright, orchestrating the final act, they lived their lives out loud, celebrating a victory they had not yet won. Their confidence was a garish spectacle, fueled by the steady flow of money from a source they still failed to comprehend. Our first step was to secure the stage for their downfall. "It cannot be my office," Mr. Albright had stated during our first planning session, his voice firm. "Too familiar. We need neutral ground, a place of unimpeachable authority." 2 days later, he confirmed it. A top-floor conference room at the prestigious law firm of Cromwell and Swain, a glass-walled chamber overlooking the city that screamed power and consequences. While Emma imagined impressing investors, we were meticulously building a courtroom. Next, Mr. Albright assembled the rest of the cast. He spoke of them in clipped, discreet tones over the phone, his professionalism a comforting shield. "I have made contact with our associates, Mrs. Hayes," he informed me one afternoon. "They have reviewed the preliminary file containing the forgery and the emails from Mr. Peterson. They have confirmed their attendance and expressed a significant interest in the matter." The associates, of course, were a senior fraud investigator from the district attorney's office and a field agent from the Internal Revenue Service. The hunters were being brought into the trap. The most painful part of this waiting game was watching my children spend their last days of blissful ignorance. Mr. Albright provided me with weekly updates from the trust's accounts, and each report was a fresh stab of betrayal. They were no longer just living lavishly. They were spending with the feverish abandon of people who believed they had just won the lottery. "Mrs. Hayes," Mr. Albright's voice was grim over the phone the following Friday, "I feel I must inform you. A down payment of $25,000 was made yesterday on a new Mercedes G-Wagon." I closed my eyes, picturing the sleek, ostentatious vehicle. another trophy for a life they hadn't earned. And this morning, he continued, it appears they have booked non-refundable first-class tickets to Rome for the week after the scheduled meeting. Cost $18,000. I remembered the statements he had first shown me, the endless river of extravagant purchases, and realized this was just the crescendo. They weren't just planning to get the money from the lake house, they were already spending it, so absolutely certain of my capitulation. I simply listened, a cold sadness settling over me. They were not just digging their own grave, they were lining it with silk. A week before the scheduled meeting, I had a final call with Mr. Albright. His voice was calm, but held an undercurrent of finality that made my heart beat faster. It is all in place, Mrs. Hayes. The room is secured. The documents are prepared. Our associates are confirmed. He paused, and I could almost hear the click of a final puzzle piece falling into place. The trap is set, and the hunters are ready. The night before the meeting, as I sat in the quiet of my living room, my phone buzzed on the table beside me. A text message glowed on the screen. It was from Emma. "Thanks for believing in us, Mom. Tomorrow is going to be a great day." I stared at the message, a humorless smile touching my lips. Yes, it will be, I thought. Just not in the way you imagine. Sometimes the best way to expose a lie is to give it enough rope to hang itself. But I was learning that it also helps to have a few good people holding the other end of that rope, anchoring you to the truth. The day after setting the meeting, I knew my next call had to be to Sarah. I set up my laptop in Arthur's study, the familiar space giving me a sense of borrowed strength, and initiated the video call. Her face appeared on my screen, framed by the familiar rustic interior of her New Hampshire real estate office. The sight of the forged document I'd sent her was still fresh in her mind, and her expression was a mixture of professional anger and personal concern. "Sarah, thank you for speaking with me," I began, my voice steady. "The meeting with my son and his wife is set for next Tuesday. I have a feeling things may get complicated. If it comes to it, would you be willing to provide a formal statement about how Liam approached you with that forged document?" Her response was immediate and fierce, her voice crackling through the speakers. "Willing? Dorothy, I'd be honored. He didn't just lie to you. He made me an unwitting accomplice in his fraud. He came in here, looked me right in the eye, and used your good name and our long friendship as a tool. It makes me sick. You just tell me when and where, and I will be there to state for the record exactly what happened." Securing her as a formal ally felt like placing a solid, unshakable stone in my foundation. Later that afternoon, needing to escape the confines of my house and the weight of my own thoughts, I went to a quiet cafe downtown that Arthur and I used to frequent, a place that smelled of espresso and old books from the shop next door. As I sat stirring a cup of chamomile tea, a voice I hadn't heard in years called my name. "Dorothy Hayes? I'll be darned." I looked up to see Mark Peterson, Arthur's old partner from his first business venture, a kind, silver-haired man I'd always admired for his quiet integrity. We made small talk, catching up on the 2 decades that had passed. He asked about my garden, and I asked about his grandchildren. I mentioned, as vaguely as possible, that Liam and Emma were embarking on a new business venture. Mark's friendly expression clouded over almost imperceptibly. "A venture, huh? Is that what he's calling it?" He leaned in, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Dorothy, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I've been worried about that boy. He came to me about 6 months ago, asking for a very substantial loan for some investment." He was sweating, Dorothy, kept looking over his shoulder. He talked about once-in-a-lifetime opportunities, but his eyes told a different story. It was the look of a man about to go under. He seemed desperate. His words landed like a missing puzzle piece. This wasn't a new problem born of a sudden, brilliant idea. Their financial desperation had been festering for a long time. It confirmed their motive with a chilling finality. "He was very persistent," Mark continued, a troubled look in his eyes. He saw the grim understanding on my face and pulled out his phone. In fact, he sent me a series of emails outlining his financial troubles and proposing some kind of partnership. I kept them. My gut told me something wasn't right. He looked at me, his eyes full of a deep, sad understanding. Arthur would have wanted me to look out for you. I think you should have them. Right there at the small cafe table, he forwarded the entire email chain to my phone. A moment later, it buzzed. I opened the first one. The subject line was urgent proposal. The message was a rambling, almost begging plea from my son, talking about crushing debt, short-term liquidity crisis, and this being his last chance to make things right. It was irrefutable proof of his long-planned desperation, written in his own words. With Mark's emails and Sarah's promise, my file was complete. All that was left was to wait for the curtain to rise. The silence before the storm is always the strangest time. The day before the meeting, my house was unnervingly quiet, a stark contrast to the frantic energy buzzing through my veins. The old grandfather clock in the hall seemed to tick louder, each second a slow, deliberate step toward the precipice. I cooked a simple roast chicken, a meal I could prepare on autopilot because my mind was entirely focused on the final performance ahead of me. This was not a dinner. It was the final dress rehearsal. They arrived precisely at 7 o'clock, not as supplicants, but as conquerors on the eve of their coronation. Emma swept in, holding up a bottle of Veuve Clicquot champagne, its iconic yellow label a flag of their premature victory. "A little something to toast to our future, Dorothy," she announced, handing it to me as if bestowing a great honor. Liam followed, a broad, confident smile plastered on his face, the haunted, desperate look from his emails to Mark now a distant memory. They truly believed they had already won. Throughout dinner, I played the part of the anxious, slightly overwhelmed mother. I pushed the chicken around my plate, taking small, hesitant bites while they talked excitedly about their plans. "I do hope this all goes smoothly tomorrow," I said, my voice intentionally shaky as I looked from Liam to Emma with what I hoped appeared to be genuine worry. "These old partners of your father's, they can be very particular. Are you sure your presentation is ready, dear? What if they ask questions I can't answer? I'd hate to say the wrong thing and ruin this for you." Emma let out a little laugh, a condescending puff of air that grated on my nerves. She reached across the table and patted my hand, her rings cold against my skin. "Dorothy, honestly, you don't need to worry your pretty little head about a thing. The presentation is a masterpiece. Your partners will be begging us to take their money. We have this completely under control. All you have to do is sit there, look supportive, and nod when it's your turn. Just leave all the hard parts to us." Her words were a perfect blend of patronizing sweetness and utter contempt. She saw me as a prop, a final, slightly doddering step on her path to wealth. Liam just nodded in agreement, his mouth full of my food, completely oblivious. As they were leaving, standing in the entryway, Liam stopped. "Oh, Mom, we almost forgot. We got you something." He pulled a long, elegant box from his jacket pocket and handed it to me. It was a Mont Blanc. I opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of black satin, was a beautiful, heavy fountain pen, its gold nib gleaming under the porch light. It felt cold and substantial in my hand. "For good luck with the signing tomorrow," he said, his smile wide and guileless. He had no idea of the irony, of the terrible prophecy contained in his simple gesture. He was handing me the very instrument of his own financial execution. After I closed the door behind them, I stood alone in the quiet hallway, the pen cool and solid in my palm. I felt its weight, the promise of its dark ink. It wasn't just a pen, it was the weapon they had handed me to sign their downfall. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in Arthur's study, the heavy Mont Blanc pen resting on his old leather blotter, a cold, silent accusation in the lamplight. The lingering scent of Emma's expensive perfume and the half-empty bottle of champagne they'd left on the counter felt like a desecration of my home. I came in here to escape it. To be surrounded by the comforting smell of old books and Arthur's lingering presence, needing to draw strength from the woman he had loved, the woman I had almost forgotten I was. On the wall hung our wedding photograph from 1981. We were so young, our faces alight with a future we thought we understood. I remembered the promise I had made to him then, a silent vow to always protect our family and the life we were so eager to build together. A bitter smile touched my lips. I was still protecting it, just not in the way either of us had ever imagined. From the bottom of his closet, I pulled a dusty box, one labeled in my own handwriting, Liam's childhood. Inside were the artifacts of a life that now felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. A faded photograph of a 5-year-old Liam, beaming with a gap-toothed grin as he held up a string of sunfish at the lake house. A crayon drawing of our family, with stick figures holding hands under a lopsided sun. I unfolded a letter Arthur had written me from a business trip 25 years ago. "Our boy has such a good heart, Dorothy," it read. "Let's make sure the world never hardens it." The ink was faded, but the words burned with a fresh, terrible irony. That was when I finally allowed myself to cry. Not with the frantic sobs of a victim, but with the deep, quiet, shuddering grief of a mother mourning a son who was still very much alive. The boy in those photographs, the child with the good heart, was gone. In his place was a stranger, a man so hollowed out by greed that he would conspire with his wife to defraud his own mother. The tears that fell weren't for the fight that was coming tomorrow. They were a funeral for the son who was already lost to me, a final goodbye to the ghost of the boy I had raised. After the tears subsided, a cold calm took their place. I carefully put the memories back in their box and slid it back into the darkness of the closet, closing the door on the past. Then I turned to the present. On Arthur's desk lay the crisp, cold folder Mr. Albright had prepared. I opened it, the pages illuminated by the single desk lamp. The warm nostalgia of the photographs was replaced by the stark reality of bank statements, forged documents, and legal affidavits. I read through the evidence one last time. This was no longer about punishing the man my son had become. It was about honoring the legacy of the man his father had been. It was about justice. As the first pale light of dawn began to filter through the window, a profound sense of peace settled over me. The storm inside had passed, the grief had been acknowledged, and what remained was pure, unshakable resolve. I was ready. I walked to my closet and pushed past the blouses and cardigans of my quiet, unassuming life. I reached for the dress hanging in the very back, protected in a garment bag. It was a simple, elegant, navy blue sheath, the one I had worn to Arthur's funeral. Today, I would also be burying something, the ghost of a perfect family. The conference room on the 40th floor of the Seagram building felt like a modern coliseum, and I knew that only one of us would be walking out a victor. The elevator had ascended in a swift, silent rush, a hermetically sealed capsule lifting me into a world of corporate power. The air in the reception area smelled of money, a sterile mix of glass cleaner, expensive leather, and recycled air. Mr. Albright greeted me with a solemn nod, and together we walked into the designated room. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic, almost indifferent view of Park Avenue below. A vast, intimidating mahogany table stretched the length of the room, reflecting the cold gray sky. This was their chosen battlefield, and I felt a strange, icy calm settle over me. We arrived early. I watched as Mr. Albright, with methodical precision, connected his laptop to the massive screen at the head of the room. A single password-protected file icon sat alone on the pristine desktop. He tested the projector, then sat down, his hands folded, a picture of quiet professionalism. I placed my own slim leather folder in front of my seat. It contained a single sheet of paper, a copy of Arthur's final letter to me, a reminder of why I was here. Liam and Emma strode in at precisely 10 o'clock, radiating an almost blinding confidence. Emma was in a sharp, cream-colored power suit, an Alexander McQueen knockoff probably, but a convincing one. Liam wore a tailored navy blue suit that seemed a size too tight, and on his wrist was a chunky, ostentatious watch that looked ridiculous. They were playing dress-up in a world they were about to lose. They shook hands firmly with the two quiet, impeccably dressed men Mr. Albright introduced only as his associates, their faces unreadable. Then Emma's eyes landed on me. She gave me a quick, patronizing smile, a silent dismissal that only fueled the icy resolve in my veins. "Shall we begin?" she asked, taking her place at the head of the table as if she owned it. For the next 30 minutes, Emma put on the performance of a lifetime. A slideshow filled with slick graphics and meaningless buzzwords flashed across the screen. "We're not just building an app, we're monetizing an aspirational lifestyle and creating holistic synergy," she declared, her voice ringing with conviction. "The only thing you've monetized is my husband's legacy," I thought. She spoke of 5-year projections and a 200% return on investment. As a slide with a wildly optimistic revenue chart appeared, my mind flashed to the real statements in Mr. Albright's folder, the river of red ink from their endless spending. I watched her, not with anger, but with a kind of detached pity. She was so blinded by her own fiction, she couldn't see the executioner's block she was so eagerly dancing upon. Liam sat beside her, nodding at all the right moments, a proud, foolish second in command. Finally, she clicked to her last slide, which held a single bold question mark. She turned away from the screen, her face flushed with triumph, and beamed directly at me. The performance was over. It was time to collect her prize. "So, Mom," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. "Are you ready to invest in the future?" I met her gaze and allowed a small, serene smile to touch my lips. "Oh, of course, dear," I replied, my voice perfectly calm, "just perhaps not in the way you think." I gave Mr. Albright a subtle, deliberate nod across the long table. It was time. The play had begun, and I was the director. My first cue was a simple, almost imperceptible nod. At my signal, Mr. Albright stood, his movements as precise and unhurried as a master watchmaker. He clicked a small remote in his hand, and the large screen behind Emma, which had been displaying her gaudy business logo, went blank and then flickered to life. An image of the forged power of attorney filled the wall, the clumsy imitation of my signature stark and damning in the high-resolution projection. The air in the room, already thin with Emma's spent ambition, grew heavy, suffocating. "Mr. Hayes," Mr. Albright said, his voice calm and dangerously neutral, a surgeon's scalpel ready to make the first incision. "Could you please confirm for our associates here, and for the record, that this is the document you presented to the real estate agency in New Hampshire to list your mother's property for sale? A simple yes or no will suffice." All eyes turned to Liam. The healthy color drained from his face, leaving a pasty gray pallor. He shot a frantic, pleading look at Emma, who gave him a tiny, almost invisible nod, a desperate command to hold the line. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. Yes," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "It is." The moment the words left his mouth, Mr. Albright clicked the remote again. The screen split into 3 panels with a soft digital whoosh. On the left, the forgery. In the middle, a high-resolution scan of my authentic signature from my passport, light and fluid. On the right, a signed and notarized report from a leading forensic document examiner. Mr. Albright used a red laser pointer to circle a single sentence, highlighted in bold letters. He read it aloud, his voice echoing in the tomb-like silence of the room. Conclusion: the signature on the power of attorney document is a non-genuine simulation, likely traced or copied, exhibiting none of the natural variations of the authentic signatory. In layman's terms, Mr. Hayes, it is a forgery. A sharp, ragged gasp escaped from Emma's lips. It was the only sound. Liam looked as if he was about to be physically ill, his hand coming up to cover his mouth. That was my cue. I rose slowly from my chair, my movements deliberate, and I felt the power in the room shift, flowing towards me like iron filings to a magnet. I was no longer a prop. "Before you attempted to sell a property that did not belong to you," I said, my voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the room, "you should have first understood to whom it truly belonged. You were fighting over a single tree, when you have been living your entire adult lives in a forest you never even knew existed." I let the statement hang in the air before continuing. "That lake house, Liam, and your home in Greenwich, Emma, the cars you drive, your children's tuition, your entire life for the past 10 years. It does not belong to you. It has never belonged to you. It all belongs to the Hayes Family Trust." Emma stared at me, her face a mask of utter disbelief. Liam looked like a man who had just seen a ghost. I turned my gaze fully on my daughter-in-law, the architect of my humiliation, and delivered the final blow. "And the only person with the authority to control that trust," I said, my voice dropping yet gaining a new, unshakable weight, "is me." Emma's face, which had been pale, began to turn a blotchy, purplish color. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Finally, she managed to stammer, her voice cracking. What trust?" I gave her a cold, empty smile. "Oh, you're about to find out." I turned and gave Mr. Albright another slight nod to continue. "Truth is like the sun. It can be warm, but it will burn you to cinders if you've lived in darkness for too long. For Liam and Emma, who had built their entire world in the cool shade of a colossal lie, the light was about to be blinding. At my nod, Mr. Albright clicked the remote. The split screen showing the forgery vanished, replaced by the clean, cold lines of a J.P. Morgan private bank statement. The title at the top was clear: The Hayes Family Trust. He let the image sink in for a moment before he began to speak, his voice a dispassionate monotone that made the facts all the more brutal. "Let's review a few of the standard monthly and recent disbursements from the last 12 months, he said, addressing the room but looking at no one. The laser pointer appeared again, a small red dot of doom that landed on the first line item. Monthly mortgage payment for the property in Greenwich, Connecticut, $17,500. My mind flashed to the small, cozy home I kept, and the bitterness was a sharp taste in my mouth. Monthly lease payment Porsche Cayenne Turbo, registered to Ms. Emma Miller, $2,300. The car Emma had claimed was a company bonus for her brilliance. Greenwich Country Day School, biannual tuition for Noah and Olivia Hayes, $31,000. An education they could never have afforded, for grandchildren who were being taught to pity me. He clicked to the next page, a summary of their credit card expenses. And then, the American Express Centurion card, which is paid in full by the trust each month. The monthly statement average is $42,000. Notable recent charges include a $28,000 ski trip to the Four Seasons in Aspen, a $19,000 shopping spree at Cartier in Paris, and a $12,000 charge at a restaurant called Per Se just last week. The air in the room grew thin, heavy, impossible to breathe. Each number was an indictment, a testament to a life of grotesque excess built on a foundation of deceit. Liam, my son, had shrunk into his chair, his face buried in his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent, humiliated sobs. Emma was breathing in short, ragged gasps, her hand clutching her throat as if she were choking, her eyes wide with a horror that had finally broken through her arrogance. The confident CEO had vanished, replaced by a terrified, cornered animal. Mr. Albright's presentation ended. He turned the screen blank, and the sudden darkness was more accusing than the light. I stood up. The simple act of rising to my feet felt like ascending to a throne. For 10 years, this trust has funded a fantasy, I announced, my voice steady and clear. It has enabled a lifestyle of deceit and arrogance. That ends today. I paused, letting the finality of my words settle. Due to a pattern of financially irresponsible behavior and the clear fraudulent intent demonstrated here today, I, Dorothy Hayes, in my capacity as the sole trustee of the Hayes Family Trust, hereby declare that the trust is frozen, indefinitely, effective as of 11 a.m. this morning. As the last word left my mouth, a sharp, angry buzz cut through the silence, shattering it. It was Liam's phone, lying face up on the polished table. A notification glowed on the screen. He lifted his head, his face a ruin, and read the words aloud in a choked, disbelieving whisper. Alert from American Express. Your transaction has been declined. The two investors exchanged a brief, knowing glance. Emma let out a sound somewhere between a sob and a scream. And that is not all, I said, turning my gaze to the two men who had remained silent throughout the entire meeting. Gentlemen, now it is your turn. As my words hung in the air, the two men I had introduced as my associates finally moved. The one on the left, a man with sharp, intelligent eyes and a stern jaw that spoke of years of dealing with liars, stood up slowly. He didn't move quickly. He allowed the silence in the room to stretch, a predator enjoying the mounting fear of its prey. He reached into the breast pocket of his tailored jacket, and for a fleeting moment, Emma probably thought he was reaching for a checkbook. Instead, he produced a slim leather wallet, flipping it open to reveal a gleaming gold badge that caught the harsh, unforgiving light of the conference room. Mr. Hayes, Ms. Miller, he began, his voice flat and devoid of any emotion, the voice of bureaucracy and consequences. I'm Agent Smith of the Internal Revenue Service, Criminal Investigation Division. We've opened a file regarding several years of substantial undeclared income that appears to have been funneled through the Hayes Family Trust and treated as non-taxable gifts. We have reason to believe this constitutes a pattern of felony tax evasion. The phrase, Criminal Investigation Division, landed in the room with the force of a physical blow. Emma stared at him, her face a mask of blank confusion, as if he were speaking a foreign language she couldn't comprehend. Liam flinched as if he'd been struck. Before they could even process the federal implications, the second man stood. He was larger, more imposing, and his gaze was even colder. He took one step forward, his presence seeming to suck all the air out of the room. And I'm Investigator O'Malley from the District Attorney's Office, Financial Crimes Bureau, he announced, his voice a low rumble that seemed to shake the very floor. Separate from the federal inquiry, my office is conducting a criminal investigation into a forged power of attorney document submitted in the state of New Hampshire. This falls under state felony statutes for fraud and financial elder abuse. We will need your full cooperation. That was the word that finally broke them completely. Forgery, fraud, felony, elder abuse. The abstract horror of their financial ruin was suddenly replaced by the very concrete, ironclad terror of prison. Emma crumpled. A raw, hysterical sob tore from her throat, and she turned on Liam, grabbing the lapels of his expensive suit. "This is your fault," she shrieked, her voice shrill with panic. "Your fault! You said it was safe! You told me she was just a stupid, lonely old woman who wouldn't do anything. You ruined us. You ruined everything." Liam didn't respond. He didn't even seem to register her blows. He just stared at the blank projection screen, his eyes glassy and unfocused, a man whose soul had just been evicted from his body. "Perhaps we should continue this in a more private setting," Investigator O'Malley said, his voice softening with a false gentleness that was more chilling than a shout. He placed a firm, inescapable hand on Liam's shoulder. "We have a room prepared for you down the hall." As O'Malley gently guided my son toward the door like a sleepwalker, Liam finally stopped, He turned and looked at me. His face a ruin of tears, disbelief, and a flicker of raw, childish resentment. "Mom," he whispered, his voice cracking into 1,000 pieces. "How could you do this to me? To your own son?" I looked at the man my son had become, a stranger wearing his face. The love was still there, a phantom limb aching for a boy who no longer existed. But the pity was gone, burned away by the acid of his betrayal. I met his gaze, my own face a mask of stone. "The real question, Liam," I said, my voice quiet but cutting through the room, "is how could you do this to me?" The door clicked shut behind them, the sound echoing in the cavernous silence. Mr. Albright walked to the crystal carafe on the table, poured a glass of water, and handed it to me. His hand was perfectly steady. "It's over, Mrs. Hayes," he said softly. I took the glass, looked out at the endless city beyond the window, and shook my head. "No," I replied, "it's just beginning." The silence after a battle always has a strange taste, half victory, half loss. In the 3 days that followed the meeting, my home returned to a state of peace I hadn't realized I'd lost for so long. The incessant, demanding phone calls had stopped. The air was no longer thick with unspoken tension and the cloying scent of manipulation. It was just quiet. On Friday morning, Mr. Albright came by. We sat in my sunroom, drinking tea, as the morning light streamed through the clean windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. He updated me on the situation with his usual professional calm, but his eyes held a new gentleness. "They are facing serious federal and state charges, Dorothy," he said, setting his cup down. "Forgery, conspiracy to commit wire fraud. The district attorney is not playing games. Given the overwhelming evidence, their lawyer is strongly advising they accept a plea deal. It will involve them pleading guilty, paying significant financial restitution, which they do not have, and serving several years of strict probation." It wasn't a victory, just a sad, logical conclusion. I nodded, saying nothing. He continued, his voice even. "On that note, the dominoes have begun to fall. The bank officially began foreclosure proceedings on the Greenwich property. The notice was served yesterday. And as a small bit of poetic justice, the leasing company repossessed the Porsche this morning. He said it as a statement of fact, not of triumph, and I received it the same way. There was no joy in this, only a profound sense of an ending. After he left, I went into my small garden. The roses Arthur had planted were in full bloom, their crimson petals heavy with morning dew. As I pruned a few stray branches, the simple, repetitive task felt grounding. I didn't feel the sharp glee of revenge. I felt a hollow ache for the boy who used to help me in this very garden, the son who had gotten so lost. My mind drifted to the lake house, its quiet shores and the memory of Arthur's laughter. I had saved it, but in doing so, I had lost my son. This wasn't a win. It was a necessary amputation to save the rest of the body from a spreading disease. A sudden sharp chime from the front door pulled me from my thoughts. The sky outside had grown dark, and a cold, steady rain had begun to fall, tapping against the window panes. I walked to the entryway and looked at the small video screen for my intercom, and my breath caught in my throat. It was Liam and Emma. They were huddled together on my doorstep, soaked to the bone, stripped of their designer clothes and their impenetrable arrogance. Emma's expensive hair was plastered to her face, her makeup running in dark, tragic streaks down her cheeks. Liam just stared at the camera, his face a mask of abject desperation and defeat. They stood there in the pouring rain without an umbrella. For the first time in years, they looked small and utterly helpless. I stood watching them on the monitor, my hand hovering over the button to speak, hesitating. After a long moment, watching their defeated figures shivering on the screen, my hesitation hardened into resolve. A mother's pity warred with a woman's hard-won dignity, and for the first time in my life, dignity won. I pressed the button. The door opened, not to welcome them back to their old lives, but to show them the only path forward. They dripped rainwater onto my clean entryway floor as they stepped inside, looking like shipwrecked survivors who had washed up on a hostile shore. Emma's mascara had created dark, tragic rivers down her cheeks, and Liam's shoulders were slumped in a way I'd never seen before, the frame of his expensive suit now seeming to hang on a broken man. "Dorothy, please," Emma began, her voice a raw, pleading whisper, all of its previous manipulative artifice stripped away by pure terror. "We'll do anything. The lawyers, the foreclosure, the IRS. Everything is gone. You can't let this happen. You have to help us." Liam just looked at the floor, mumbling, "Mom, please. We made a mistake." "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it had the finality of a steel door slamming shut. "The life you knew is over." I walked past them into the living room, and they followed like lost children. I did not invite them to sit. "I will not watch you become homeless," I said, turning to face them, my voice clear and unwavering. "But I will no longer finance your fantasies. Your father always believed in the dignity and value of honest work. He built everything we had from nothing. It seems it's a lesson you are both long overdue to learn." Their faces, which had held a desperate flicker of hope, fell into masks of despair. "Here are my terms," I continued. "You will accept the plea deal offered by the district attorney. You will both find jobs. You will begin to pay back your debts, starting with the court-ordered restitution. If, and only if, you do those things, I will provide for a small one-bedroom apartment for you to rent and a minimal monthly stipend for basic necessities. I will provide a floor, but I will no longer provide a ceiling." I walked to the small secretary desk in the corner, took out my checkbook, and wrote out a check. The scratching of the pen was the only sound in the room. I handed it to Liam. "This is for the first month's deposit and groceries. It is $1,500. The number, so pitifully small compared to the sums they were used to, seemed to stun them more than anything else I had said. "This is your new beginning," I told them. "Learn to value it." Liam took the check, his fingers trembling. He stared at it, then at me, and in his eyes I saw the dawning, horrifying realization that the river of gold had truly, finally run dry. Emma just sobbed quietly, a sound of utter defeat. Without another word, they turned and walked out of my house, and out of the life I had so mistakenly built for them. After they were gone, I brewed a pot of tea and sat on my back porch. The rain had stopped, and the air smelled clean and new, the sun breaking through the clouds. My phone rang. It was a woman with a cheerful voice. "Mrs. Hayes, this is Maria from Voyager Travel, just calling to confirm your booking for the Grand World Tour. Your first stop will be Florence, Italy." I smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached my eyes and warmed my soul. "Yes," I said, "everything is confirmed." At long last, it was time to invest in my own future. As I hung up the phone after confirming my ticket to Florence, I realized the silence in my house was no longer the sound of loneliness. It was the sound of freedom. I had to learn the hardest lesson. Protecting your own dignity is not selfish. It is the ultimate act of self-respect. True family is built on a foundation of mutual respect, not on a ledger of what can be taken. This morning, as I look out at my garden, everything seems a little brighter. I'd love to hear your own stories in the comments below. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to reclaim your own strength?